All right, next up we've got Lucas and Alexa. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
See you. So tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So we are the founders of XK, which is a design and motion practice based in London. Since we last spoke, we grew from just us two into a team of 6 creatives. We specialize in the creation of 3D films, campaigns, and video installations, and very often work with brands directly, but also through collaboration with agencies.
Great. And what are you going to be presenting on today?
We're going to be talking through some of the projects that we completed in the past year, what were the creative and technical challenges, and how we used Houdini's procedural nature to address and solve them. And one of the key aspects of what we want to talk about today is that as we are still a small studio and we kind of do all the stages of the project ourselves, we want to touch upon why it's really important for us to keep the entire workflow within one software environment, and what kind of how that helps us to save time and kind of focus on more of the creative than just sorting out and transitioning between different pieces of pipeline.
Yeah, especially as the timelines nowadays in the commercial world are getting shorter and shorter. We realize that how we work is just as important as the work itself, and finding very efficient ways of being able to quickly turn around projects while still keeping ourselves really happy with the outcome is really crucial to our work.
Very cool. Well, looking forward to it. Let's jump into that.
Let's go.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you, Side Effects, for inviting us once again this year.
We are delighted to be doing the second year in a row. We're the founders of XK, a London-based creative studio. We work as visual artists and designers across the moving image industry, specializing in 3D films, video installations, and visual campaigns. We have a very experimental approach to our work. We love to explore subjects of nature, fashion, and technology. And we often combine a handcrafted approach with procedural tools.
We will be talking through some of the projects we completed in the past year, the creative and technical challenges that arose, and how we leveraged Houdini's procedural nature to address them. Also, as we're a small studio and we do everything ourselves, we will touch upon why it is essential for us to keep most, if not all, of the stages of the project within a single environment. So our entire workflow from inception all the way to completion is based in Houdini.
I'd say that this provides us with a great level of flexibility and control, and allows us to iterate quickly through designs, but also to address feedback later in a project, despite being quite deep into production.
The first project we'll be talking about is the campaign visuals and film for the Timberland and Liberty, made to Step Outside launch. Let's have a look at the film first.
So you probably know Timberland, but if you haven't heard of Liberty London, it's one of the oldest department stores, and one thing they're very famous for is this floral fabric and pattern that you can see on the right-hand side.
The idea behind the campaign was to celebrate the beauty of nature by bringing to life this animated yet organic, living and growing garden. This would act as a digital-first, modern representation of the Liberty pattern and fuse the worlds of nature and technology together.
These are some of the key visuals that we develop alongside the moving asset.
It was great to go to the store on the launch day and see all our work come to life on the screens across London. And yeah, now to dive a bit into the process. From the start, we knew that we would like to take inspiration from the pattern itself and the real world, but we wanted to imbue the designs with a sense of otherness.
This is something that's been very close to our practice for a while, such as this project called Strange Spring that's up on the screen now from last year, where we did combine the kind of traditional modeling with Houdini's procedure and simulation tools. And this time, when we wanted to keep some of the tactility of real plants, what we did is that we ordered a bunch of flowers.
A lot of flowers.
And tried to kind of scan some of the textures ourselves. And here's an example like how we would use something like this. We had a reference photo and employed Houdini's using a variety of techniques combining both hand modeling and procedural approaches. Here, for example, it's using Topo Build, which is a thin, like amazing polygonal modeling tool that just allows you very quickly lay out your topology. But if you don't have time for that, or you don't quite care about your topology, you can just use the trace mode, where you can plug an image, and you're going to get an outline of the contrast from the image, and then you can combine it with a quad remesher that's going to get you a mesh that's super fast to get, and you can use it with vellum later on.
Yeah, once we traced these petals, we used a lot of vellum brush, which allows you to interactively sculpt and add a more natural look to that flat geometry. We used different types of brushes within this, and depending on the look we were after, for example, this we just wanted to add some extra ruffles and like bends to the edges of the petal themselves. Some flowers were a lot more abstract than others and did not follow the previous workflow. For instance, this one uses an attribute within vellum's rest length to set the areas that would expand versus the areas that would contract. And yeah, once we had a decent amount of flowers, we started placing them to create this floral arrangement around the boot, using vines to create the structure that they would be placed on. And this was one of our initial arrangements before arriving at our final layout that you can see rendered here in clay.
So as the timeline was fairly short, around 2 weeks, I think, we had to develop the key visual alongside the animation. So the layout we were building was referencing a separate file for each flower that would be worked on individually, both expanding on the detailing, but also working on the animation.
So yeah, once the detail was ready, the motion within it only needed some slight timing adjustments and was ready to go. The second project we'd like to talk to you about is Shoplifter at Kulturhuset.
Shoplifter is a contemporary artist from Iceland who works with synthetic hair. She creates these very vibrant rainbow-colored sculptures, installations, and performances.
Yeah, the way she works with hair and color fully transforms spaces into these transcendent and immersive experiences.
That we were actually lucky to witness her work in real life a year prior to working on the project. We visited the Venice Biennale Icelandic Pavilion, which was quite a surreal and amazing experience.
Her work really resonated with us, as we also love using hair in our personal work, which is actually one of the reasons why we were approached by House of Culture Stockholm, also known as Kulturhuset in Sweden.
They got in touch with us and asked us to create the imagery and animations that would promote Shoplifter's upcoming exhibition called Chromosomes across the city of Stockholm and online. So let's have a look at the film we made.
Working closely with the artist herself, we crafted the animation that you've just seen, which was bringing to life the title of the exhibition, whilst encapsulating the wonder and mesmerizing quality of her art. And the core aim of the campaign was to capture that tactility of Shoplifter's work within a digital form that would exist to promote the exhibition across different media.
We designed and animated an adaptable 3D device which was used on digital signs across the gallery that guides the viewer to the identity of the exhibition by following the trail of the Chromosomes logo.
Yeah, taking inspiration from the installation's main colors allowed us to create digitally tactile visuals that teased the look of Shoplifter's exhibition, but also evoked the calm and natural motion of the hair she works with.
The work ran throughout the city of Stockholm, in and around the Kulturhuset theatre, and on large scale screens, just like you can see here.
Yeah, it's always cool to see your work in a physical space.
Yeah, instead of seeing it on your phone on Instagram.
Part of the campaign was also this outdoor animated installation, which reacted to the speed of the wind, and it played the animation slower or faster, depending on the information that was being fed through. This was greatly appreciated.
We went through quite a few ideas at the start of a project. So these are some of the other concepts that we did. One was creating a 3D tunnel made out of hair. The camera would fly through, and we imagined that as that happens, the hair and the color of it would react to the motion of the camera.
Another one was to make a series of animated sculptures inspired by her work. But as we wanted the film to resolve on the title of the exhibition, we decided to strip this concept down and focus on the title itself.
So this was the first sketch from the artist that we went and turned into a 3D sculpture. But quite early on, we realized that if you start with a very thin line, if you want to make the logo appear a bit bolder, have a bit more gravitas, you have to make the hair longer, and then you start to lose legibility. And as we wanted to get really close to the actual sculptures she makes, which are a lot more bolder and thicker, it will be very hard to keep it legible. As you can see here, the O's and M kind of stops being legible.
But it was great to collaborate with Shoplifter on this, as she came up with a different design for the title based on our early tests and suggestions. And this version was a lot more spaced out and allowed us to go big and bold with the hair. Here you can see our workflow for turning the sketch into the 3D hair. And what was particularly handy in this instance was the ability to paint on the surface of the type the areas we might find problematic from a legibility point of view, and use that attribute when setting the hair length. And as this was all procedural, we could always go back and forth and tweak the areas that needed different lengths until we achieved the look that we were after.
For the film and the animated version, we extruded the driving curves and animated their thickness. The hair simulation was actually done on a rest frame, and we then used a hair gen workflow to not only add a lot more hair, but also attach the hair to the animated sweep geometry.
As we did all the rendering and look dev in Houdini, it was great to be able to fine-tune all the different aspects of the sim, like bend stiffness and strength of turbulence forces, as well as the amount of the hair itself, and directly see how all these parameters affect the final image and get the look that we wanted a lot quicker.
All right, let's move on to another project, which was done for Zitstika, which is a client that we worked on a lot. It's actually a set of projects as we help them with several of their product launches, and we'll be sharing an assortment of images and films that resulted from this collaboration, first of which is called Skin Discipline.
For the Skin Discipline film, which was our first project with them, we aimed to create a new approach to wellness campaigns by exploring the depiction of skincare science through artistic 3D design. We wanted to craft like a fresh and abstract but also tactile visual language that speaks to acne sufferers but also feels intimate and honest while explaining the innovation behind their products.
The overarching challenge was to highlight the issues surrounding acne while echoing Zitstika's friendly and non-shameful tone of voice throughout the overall look of the films.
We love to do quick motion tests, and the fact that we shade, light, and render them straight away from Houdini makes you very quickly see if something is working or not. And the procedural nature also means that often the final shots are descendants of these quick sketches that we did at the start of the project. So this means you can keep on improving things without having to start over all the time.
One example of evolving idea was this ingredient section, where at the start of the project we quickly explored an idea of these bubbles getting sucked in and making the pill. But as those were a little bit too abstract, we worked on representing each ingredient in a stylized, more engaging way. And once we have those, we apply that playfulness and concept of them getting sucked in from the earlier stage of the design process. And before we jump to the other project we did for Zitstika, let's have a look at the R&D reel that we made for Skin Discipline.
Another project we did with them quite recently was for one of their latest products called Blur Potion. Let's play you the film first. As this was aimed at treating hyperpigmentation and post-inflammatory spots instead of just acne, our team explored ways to visualize a blurring motion in different ways by transferring color from colliding geometry and diffusing it through the use of subsolvers, taking those and extruding them in different ways to add a bit of depth. This led to some pretty interesting looks when combined with the original color. You can see that some tests were crazier than others. The section about elasticity was a great one to use vellum on again. We used the vellum brush initially to sculpt that shape and get these very art-directed folds that we then stretched. And we tried multiple versions to get the one that looked the most natural and worked best in the edit.
To represent the ingredients on this project, the team started with a more fluid look, but then later steer towards more grainy particle substances. That's how the actual pill looks inside. But we were able to actually keep the same forces and improve or modify the shots or shot in other areas.
We also played with some more 2D looking patterns, which we then used to advect particles to get a more tactile look.
And let's jump on the next one, which is a project we did for Timberland and the launch of True Cloud lineup. Let's check out the film.
Again, the full campaign consisted of a lot of assets, stills, teasers, clips for social media.
It was cool to see all of this come together on the site. The
main thing about this technology is the lightness and use of natural wool. So we tried to capture that throughout the project, making clouds out of wool, individual threads.
And here we tried to turn the actual knitting process into clouds by doing a procedural model and animation of a knit structure first and then turning it into clouds later on. So we had quite a lot of fun exploring this from different angles.
Yeah, and again, it was key for us to do the sims and cloud generation as well as the look dev in Houdini, because with volumes it's just so important to be able to immediately see how are the density values affecting your renders, and also quickly fire some render tests to check you're all moving.
We used vellum here for all the wool and thread simulations and examining how simple initial shapes and evolving the animations of them to drive the sims can result in satisfying mix of organic behavior which still has some structure to it. We also try to use vellum cloth simulations to drive the motion of clouds. So this here does not actually use any pyro, rather it's just deforming or transforming the cloud voxels based on the vellum points, which gave it quite squishy look and feel.
We also created several tease stills and animation that would hint at the shoe without revealing it in its entirety. This was always set against a light and blue sky, and through our art direction we wanted to encapsulate a feeling of rising motion and lightness. For these visuals we turned the shoe geometry into a cloud shape by using Houdini's own cloud node, but also some custom VOP noises. We also wanted to combine the clouds with the threads. For some of these visuals, here are some early style frames we developed. Here's a quick workflow that we used for generating the shoe threads. We started with modeling a low proxy version of the shoe with topo build. We then shot a bunch of particles on that surface, and by trailing the particles we got both a horizontal and vertical set of lines that would follow the upwards contours. We combined the two to achieve this woven effect that we then simulated with vellum hair to convey the lightness and free-flowing thread feel.
The team also used some pyro in combination with vellum hair and experimented with different ways to turn the threads into cloud shapes. So yeah, it was great to be able to combine the different simulations and solvers together.
Something that saves us a lot of time on projects like this, where one asset is used across several shots, and especially as the design of the boot kept changing and we'd be receiving frequent updated models, we would always reference the one cached model for that asset.
So even if the file would keep updating and being worked on, the entire setup of all the rest of it would keep working without us having to really change anything down the line. You can see it here that we use some groups to isolate part of the mesh, which we then apply materials on. But also, we need to add some small hairs to the upper. So that's very easily done by just isolating the upper, and then the laces are being simulated with vellum later on.
So yeah, even if we change the main shoe model, all these changes will propagate throughout all the shots very easily.
And the last project is a commission that we did for the Royal Exchange, which is one of the oldest and most iconic buildings in the heart of the City of London, which is now a retail center with high-end fashion and accessory boutiques.
Yeah, we've been commissioned by them to produce a series of 3D animated illustrations inspired by the idea of modern luxury. These were part of their Future Meets Craft campaign, and to us, craft is often evident on the very close inspection. So we thought of creating these very abstract details that could be found on a handbag or jewelry pieces, but wouldn't be immediately recognizable as that.
We took materials that are synonymous with luxury fashion and interior design and interpreted them, or interpreted the theme by using fabric, glass, and metallic textures, and we played them against each other in these abstract kinetic artworks.
We started by creating a set of individual elements which reflected the theme and tried to look into the future of craft. By creating abstract designs, which you can identify as fashion pieces or jewelry pieces, but they aren't necessarily real.
We have a few time lapses to show you how some of these were created. As you can see, it's often combining procedural modeling techniques with vellum sims.
The beauty of working procedurally is that you can set things like glue constraints based on distance. And this means you can experiment with changing the design without having to manually reset all your pins every time you want to change the features of the garment.
And yes, the entire node chain is always alive. It's super easy to play with the design kind of above your simulation and see how that actually affects the simulated look later on.
Yeah, by keeping the design and simulation within the same environment where we light and shade everything, it's great to be able to always dive into each object and adjust things or find different frames until that particular element complements the overall composition nicely.
Well, this last one here doesn't actually use any vellum or any simulation at all. It's just an example of some simple procedural modeling to build up this vase.
So we used Houdini for all the lighting and shading as well. Like I said, we tried several lighting scenarios, and as we were using a lot of metallic surfaces, even slightly different adjustments to the light would have a big impact on the overall look. And even though we were commissioned to create only 3 artworks, we really got carried away with trying out different layouts, different color combinations, trying out different points in time of the simulated elements. And yeah, it was important to keep these visuals quite graphic with a limited color palette, and play with levels of scale in different combinations. Shading wise, we tried to achieve a balance between refractive and glossy materials, with some more matte ones, But yeah, this was another great project for us to use Houdini on from start to finish. And yeah, we were able to very quickly iterate through all these different elements and compositions and be very prolific with our output. So I think that's it from us. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the talk.
And before we go, we wanted to give a quick shout out to some of the great tools and libraries that make our life a lot easier, particularly the MOPS, the AE library, and of course, all the amazing stuff that Side Effect Labs keep coming up with. Thank you, and bye everyone.